If you appreciate the precision and craftsmanship of barrel-aged craft beer, you have to check out the Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago. This annual festival and competition promises 350 one-of-a-kind pours from the best barrel-aged brewing programs in the country. Elevate your craft beer experience with bold, uniquely crafted beers across 13 style categories. The Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago takes flight November 22nd and 23rd. Get your tickets at fobab.com, FOBAB.com.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl. Alexandra Nowell, the longtime brewer, pop advocate, and all-around good person, is here for a conversation about how this past season went in the Yakima Valley and to talk about her new brewery in Ohio, Mellotone Beer Project. First, a reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com for original articles, reviews, news, insights, podcasts as well. Listen to shows like the All About Beer podcast, hosted by M. Souter and Don Tess, and the Brewer to Brewer podcast, which is hosted by a rotating cast of brewers. You can listen to those shows simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at All About Beer. And you can always keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases by checking out This Week in Rauch Beer by searching the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauch Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. We also have a couple of the This Week in Rauch Beer custom-made ball caps available by visiting allaboutbeer.com/merch. If you want to learn more about advertising on this show or supporting this show, you can email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer, where a few bucks goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. All right, on to the show. Alexandra Nowell has been in the brewing industry for years, in a career that started with an internship at Sierra Nevada. She would later move on to Drake's Brewing Company in California, where she oversaw tremendous growth for that brand, as well as the barrel-aged beer program. Shortly after joining there, she won 2 medals at the Great American Beer Festival, and she was then head brewer at Kinetic Brewing. In 2014, just a decade ago, she helped launch 3 Weavers, also in California, and oversaw that company's growth and professional medal count. She's also been working at CLS Farms for the past couple of years, helping with brewery outreach and education regarding the annual hop harvest and new products. And now she's getting ready to launch Mellotone Beer Project in Ohio, which is where she joined me from for this podcast. Here's our conversation. Before we start talking about your new brewery venture, you also spend your summers or late summers and early fall out in the Yakima Valley at CLS Farms. I feel like there's so much happening in the world this year, and I usually try to do a check-in of like, hey, what happened and how was harvest and everything else? And I just didn't get a chance to get around to it this year. So I'm going to ask you to be the ambassador for not only the farm, but for the region. And how was 2024 harvest in the Pacific Northwest this year?
I think that harvest overall went well. If you talk to a farmer, they'll say it was an average harvest. And they don't mean average in terms of like C, right? You know, it's not a C, but average in terms of like, you know, yields were good, nothing too unexpected. Weather didn't throw anything too crazy at us. So like overall, pretty mild, pretty average. I think that there were a couple of things that came into play this year that we maybe haven't seen in the past. To this degree, and that was a lot of delayed maturities on certain varieties. So it was taking longer for things to kind of present themselves as aromatically ripe. And so for that, there was some shuffling that we did on the farm personally for like pick windows. We started picking El Dorado a lot later this year than we historically would have. And we picked El Dorado into October, which almost never happens. So like, I think that you won't hear too many complaints, although at the end of the harvest, there were a couple pretty big fires that occurred in a baling room of one farm and then of a warehouse, like an alpha hop dominant warehouse as well. So, you know, it didn't go without its hiccups, but I think now that, you know, being back on the brewing brewing and like consumer side, I think that I was happy with harvest. I really liked what I saw. There was some of the best Citra I've seen in years. But
Ooh.
then on another side, yeah, some of the aromas were maybe a little bit stifled because they weren't given the opportunity to hang maybe as long as they should have. So no major fires, so that's good because smoke is definitely a concern these days with wildfires becoming pretty prolific in the region, especially that time of year. Really, it's year round, but so that's previous years we've had issues with smoke. There was a couple of days where we woke up in the morning and we're like, okay, it's a little hazy. We know this isn't fog, but luckily anything that settled into the valley blew out just as quickly. So
Okay.
um, no weird smoke taint this year.
Good.
And so, yeah, I think the 2024 harvest was a good one, and I will adopt what a farmer says and say it was an average harvest. Nothing too crazy, and certainly nothing catastrophic.
Okay.
Yeah,
From your brewer hat, though, when you're saying that this is some of the best Citra that you've come across in a while, how so? Like, what does that mean? Unpack that a little bit for me, because I'm.
yeah. So, okay. I mean, we all know hops are an agricultural product, and they're not necessarily going to be the same year to year. A proprietary variety like Citra that is pretty well managed by the owners of that variety, you'd like to see not a ton of variability from year to year because, that's the whole point of these like breeding programs that manage these varieties. However, there's some years where maybe they're not quite as bright or vibrant in aroma. And this year I smelled some Citra and I was like, wow, it's like smelling it again for the first time when it was such a unique aroma. And we just really hadn't smelled anything like that in the hop world. And to come across examples of that hop this year was really exciting. And I've brewed beer with Citra like almost immediately where
Yeah.
I wasn't using a ton of Citra previously because it maybe was a little lackluster or I felt that there were other options for me, but I'm genuinely excited about that hop again.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, in for then, for folks who might start experiencing this in their glass, like down the line, what was it that you first remembered about? So, like, what were some of those olfactory memories that came back to you that were present this time around?
It's not even like a specific aromatic character, it was an intensity. It was like opening a bag of hops and getting this crazy, heavy intensity of aroma that was bright. It was like it was like shiny. It was like opening a bag of hops and having like sunbeams shine out of it, like right up your nose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, was that enough for you? Is that a
No,
good
I
enough?
mean that's. I feel like this could also just be like an '80s goofball comedy now of sunshine up your nose, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, because I mean, I obviously have a lot of experience brewing in California, a lot of hop focused beers. And up until that point, we had Simcoe, which was a really great, really beautiful hop, still one of my favorites. But like opening a really good bag of Citra, and most brewers will understand exactly what I'm saying here. Like, there's an unmatched intensity that you get from that experience, just so concentrated and so just bright.
I like that.
Yeah.
So part of your gig at CLS is there's a lot of brewers that come through. They're doing rubbings. They're trying to figure out lots. They're trying to plan out their next year. And I know you have a lot of conversations with folks along the way. This past year has seemed troublesome for the overall industry. There's a lot more worry in people's voices than maybe there was even just a year ago, and certainly more than in 2019. If you take even the pandemic out of the equation, um, where where do you get the sense brewers' heads are at these days? Because you have more conversations than most with a pretty wide swath of people.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I don't know if I get a representative sample in Yakima because generally the people that are coming to visit, they have the means to travel and they're overall generally really excited about what's going on. And so, yeah, there have been previous years, especially with the larger brewers. Those are the
Hmm.
ones you tend to get a really realistic view of what's happening in the industry because they feel it pretty hard just in volume alone. And we see them no matter what because their hop supplies are just so massive. They're all coming out and selecting and having a really good firm hold on their supply chain. But I think this year was way more positive than the past 2 years. You know, people are coming out of the pandemic. Some businesses are growing now. They're finally thriving a bit. And so I generally saw excitement from brewers. I was talking with Shelley Demaray, one of the owners of CLS, about this, and we just kind of felt just sort of like a light airiness to a lot of the visitors that we had. People were happy again.
Hmm.
They were, and more people are kind of, you know, historically have maybe been a little over contracted on hop varieties. We see a lot of new interest in writing new contracts for hops. And so that tends to be a little bit of a sign too that some businesses are rebounding. They're at least digging themselves out of the holes that they were in, but like they're excited about buying hops again because it's not like a weight on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that excitement in mind, then thinking about some of the conversations that you might have had, there's always the. I'm sure when people come out, there's a lot of hop forward beer talk. There's a lot of IPA and what's gonna sell well and what's gonna pop. Was there anything out of these conversations that might lead you to believe that there's, I don't know, emerging interest in other styles?
And
Or
lagers have been kind
yeah,
of floating around for a while, and I think a growing contingent because I think we're an aging population of brewers.
also that. Yep.
And happy beers are still wonder. I mean, it's what I love. It's what I love to drink. But like, you know, hand me a really meticulously crafted Hellas, and I might be a little bit happier depending on the moment. But yeah, there's been a bit more of an interest in agronomically sound, domestically grown lager varieties. So that's really interesting because I think it's not a volume play, but I think a lot of growers are trying to diversify, see like what else they can kind of throw into their pipeline of growth so that they're not a proprietary heavy farm or relying on just a subsection of the industry, even though IPA is still pretty much king. But
Yeah.
yeah, seeing a lot more interest in conversation around that. There's been, it was actually a pretty good year in Europe for hops, but historically that hasn't been the case. And so I think that there's been maybe a shift away from leaning on the European market for these really nice noble type varieties. And it would be nice to see a bit more of that grown here on our own soil. I mean, it definitely cuts out transit over an ocean.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the freshness of a hop or something like that, right? It's all positive.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other takeaways from this past year that I did not ask about? Because
Not necessarily.
okay.
Yeah, I just think it was a really nice year. We saw less people, I think, than previous years, and certainly not a lot of the repeat trips that we would see from other breweries. So there's probably a little bit of tightening of the belts when it comes to travel. But it was just it was a breath of fresh air because you don't really know. The hop industry tends to follow about 18 months behind the beer industry. And so the hop industry is starting to feel a bit of a squeeze when it comes to contracting from dealers to the farms. And so there was corn growing in some trellises in Toppenish, and
I'm sorry, you said corn?
I did say corn.
Okay.
So on the reservation you would see corn in previous hop fields, so they're at least monetizing the field, but it wasn't with hops. And there were a lot of trellises that a lot of hops didn't get strong this year. And so I think that sure, the brewing side may be starting to rebound, but I think we need to have some concern about what's going on the grower side because there's definitely some turmoil there.
For brewers or brewing professionals that are listening to this, then I mean, you're not fully sounding an alarm, but I mean you just got my interest there. What do you want them to be thinking about then long term as far as
I know that the spot market is very healthy, but that will disappear, right? There's a lot of overages of varieties that are coming in at really good prices, and that's great. And stored well, you can use a previous crop year variety, no problem. However, I've never been reliant on the spot market because contracts are what really helps secure the financial future of the grower.
mm-hmm.
And so without the contract, there's no promise, there's no dedication to the variety. And so there really isn't a good gauge of what should be planted, how much, what varieties, right? And I still really drive home the importance of writing contracts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you're not in Yakima, you're finding yourself in Cincinnati, Ohio, home of a regional chili delicacy that I've yet to experience, but I've heard a lot about. And we can talk about that later on. But tell me about Mellotone. Tell me about what it's like to open up a brewery in late 2024.
It's been fun. I People
You
ask
haven't
me
been
how.
in startup mode for a while now, right?
No, no, definitely not. And 10 years actually, the Three Weavers 10th anniversary is is this year. So
Okay.
yeah, it's been a while. And actually this is a very different model to Three Weavers. Three Weavers was purely production focused and Mellotone is a brew pub. So not only am I opening a brewery, I'm also opening a restaurant. And I think that that's scarier than opening a brewery. But
Are you going to be serving the Cincinnati chili?
only when we want to. Like
Okay.
it's a fairly divisive thing, Cincinnati chili. So I don't want to piss the wrong people off by making something that isn't Cincinnati enough for them,
Just like
right?
right out the gate. Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
don't let them hear me say that I would make it better, that our chef would make it better, because our chef is also not from Cincinnati. But no, we'll have a cheese coney on the menu every now and then. But no, we're not hanging our hat on chili.
I think you need
We
to tell people that you're going to deconstruct it. Go back to that era of food and just
There's going to be a bar of chocolate, a cinnamon stick, and a pile of ground beef. That's it. Um, on the plate, it's up to you. Use your imagination.
sure, yeah.
But
Make your own. Yeah.
yeah, to choose. I loved choose your own adventure books when I was growing up. So you know what, I'm here for it. And you know what, I will put your name. This will be called John Hall. The
Perfect.
John Hall, not from Cincinnati. So
Perfect. Yeah.
but no, it's been really good. And I think that, people ask me if I'm stressed, and occasionally the answer is yes. But we've
It'd be
assembled
weird if you weren't. Yeah.
yeah, but we've assembled a really great team. And so because of that, I think that I can say that no, we haven't been overly stressed. And I think that we also have a really good landlord partner in this as well. My business partner, Dennis Kramer Wine, and I, we built a really solid business plan that was able to garner us a decent amount of funding. So we haven't felt cash strapped. And I think a lot of stress and startup, inevitably comes from lack of funding. And we've done pretty good at positioning ourselves in a comfortable way where we're able to do things properly. Sure, occasionally have to compromise on some stuff when it comes to a budget, but going into this with a solid budget, knowing what's been allocated to spend, knowing what needs to be a conversation, has really taken a lot of the pain and the pinch points out of startup. And it's been a really nice process
That's
overall.
that's refreshing to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
as somebody who talks to a lot of breweries that are getting ready to open, I don't often hear that level of thoughtfulness and or calmness.
I learned a lot from Lynn Weaver at Three Weavers about these things. So, honestly, she set me up to do this, watching how things were allocated funding wise at Three Weavers, and also understanding when we were strapped for cash, how to maneuver, and just how to kind of take that overarching 10,000-foot view, and then also get really molecular on what's going on. So we knew what was going to happen. We knew things are more expensive now than before, and just giving ourselves a bit of a contingency in there that we still haven't touched. And then when it comes to the restaurant portion of it, we hired a professional to come in as a director of food and hospitality. He's worked in the Cincinnati food world in these incredible restaurants here for 16 years. And so his name's Brendan Martin, and he was able to give us the reality of the restaurant side. So we haven't had any weird surprises. There's been a couple things through the process of taking over a previous, a building that was previously a brewery, finding some of the skeletons in the closet of the structure. And so those are surprises, but not surprises that we aren't ready to remedy and can't afford to do.
So you brought up something interesting that I've been thinking a lot about the future of beer. And there were right now I'm sort of looking at 2026 as a rebuilding year. 2025, people sort of getting their houses in order again, much like what you were saying with some of the hop contracts and thinking about, the future. Um, and there will inevitably be a new crop of breweries that open up, from people who have the passion, who want to follow their dreams, and I fully support that. But there were, in the mid 20 teens, a lot of folks who had no previous brewery experience, but knew that they liked the industry, knew that they liked drinking, and just kind of went into it. And some of those have lasted, a lot haven't, or it's been a real nasty struggle for them along the way. And hearing you talk about those early days of Three Weavers, what you learned from Lynn, and now being able to apply that real world scenario to your own place, there's got to be the benefit to that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
could you have opened up your own brewery like in the same way 10 years ago without that practical experience?
I don't think so. I definitely don't think so. And I don't think that people would have taken me as seriously when it comes to like taking a business plan, like a deck, a PDF deck to someone and saying, please give me thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Give me your money, right? Like an idea is one thing, but to monetize that idea is something very different. And people had to trust us just based off of what was on paper. And I don't think that that would have been the case had I had not had the experience with the Ruben.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm thinking about how I'd like to see the next generation of brewers go, of like put in the time in the industry someplace
Yeah.
almost like those early days of, the late 80s, early 90s kind of thing of, it's great to have that entrepreneurial spirit, but I think there's
Back
a
it with
lot of,
experience,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Because also, I think that right now the consumer base is so well educated and just not willing to put up with nonsense anymore that they'll pretty quickly vote with their dollars going forward if you're, not dialed in, if your recipes aren't there, if the place just kind of feels
Thrown together.
slapdash. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So like, when it comes to Mellotone, that was something, it's actually a big part of the concept of this brewery was taking a different stance on what people think of as craft breweries. And, I told Dennis early on, I was like, there will not be an Edison bulb string light. There will not be an aluminum backlifts bar stool. Like, I'm not building shit out of pallets. Like, that's not, we've grown up past that. We've matured past this part in the industry. And those breweries are a dime a dozen. And I wanted to do something that was different and that would appeal to a wider variety of people, not just your typical craft beer drinker, brewery hunter sort of person. Like, we wanted to establish ourselves in the city as a business that will stay within the city and maybe not like, rise and fall with a certain trend. So we're leaning really heavily into the concept of hospitality. Like, we're opening a restaurant that has a brewery, but like we are also opening a bar downstairs that has a small music performance space, like a neighborhood bar for our
fun.
neighborhood. Like, we're in a residential area. Um, we're activating our spaces in a way that are mindful for the spaces themselves. We're moving into what used to be Taft Ale House in Over the Rhine. So we're in the cultural hub of the city, in the urban core of Cincinnati. And, Taft's was here for just under 9 years. And, their business model changed. They still have a very large production facility on the west side of Cincinnati, and they're primarily doing contract brewing. And, I don't think their heart was in running a restaurant in the urban core any longer. And that's okay. I hate seeing businesses go under, but like, we really hit the jackpot with this property. It's a church that was built in 1850 that was completely restabilized and rebuilt in like 2015. And so the bones are new, for the most part, but we're in this beautiful historical shell. It's got like 46-foot ceilings. It's a church, but a church where there was brewing equipment already because staff just kind of walked away from all of it. And so we've done a full interior redesign, all the lighting, all the colors, all the finishes, all the furniture. But we hired this amazing chef to be our director of food and hospitality, who's worked in some of the, like I mentioned, the best, like when I say the best restaurants in Cincinnati, I'm not like, I'm saying that for real because he has worked in like the best restaurants here. And so his training and his palate are well above what you would typically expect going into a brew pub project. But we knew that that's something that we needed going in here. We needed a pro. We needed someone who would attract the right talent on the restaurant side because like people will come for the beer, but it's the food, I think, that'll make people stay and return over and over again. There are a lot of breweries in Cincinnati, but there aren't a lot of brew pubs that are really leaning into the concept of an elevated level of hospitality. And I say elevated not to be like, not like super bougie, but like you can come in to our restaurant where we do have a scratch kitchen, where we are mindful of where we're sourcing our ingredients. And sure, we're going to have a smash burger on the menu, but it's going to be the best smash burger you've had in a long time. And we will lean heavily into vegetables and seasonality and just sort of elevate classics and then take elevated concepts and like bring them back down to like the middle ground. And so I call it the brew pub of my dreams because it's like everything I loved about living in California with like food quality and just execution at all levels. The space is beautiful. The food will be beautiful. The beer will be beautiful. And, you know, I think we saw this building. It's a very large building. It's like 12,500 square feet. So it's not a small.
No, that's impressive.
Not a small operation. Right. And so we needed to be able to ensure that we were attracting all walks of life into our space and with different sort of concepts. And it sounds like a lot when I talk about it, but like when you walk into the space, it works. Like when you look at it, feel it, it all works together. And I guess I don't know if it necessarily works because we haven't opened. But we're opening in like 2 weeks, so it's coming.
We're recording this. I'll say the day before Election Day, just so that people have the concept of when 2 weeks is. Yeah. I like hearing that intentionality too, right? Because I've been thinking a lot about when I go out and like I like spending money at breweries. I like, you know, paying for a good time. And I have been so frustrated. This is nothing new that I'm saying here, but so frustrated by some of the mediocrity that's out there, or just sort of the, you know, I know food costs are expensive these days, and I know people are getting hit, you know, in various ways. But like, if something's coming off of a Cisco truck and they've, you know, to save a couple of bucks on their end, but not for us, you know, went down a level of hamburger buns or something, you know, like you start to notice over time, and it becomes less fun to go out. And again, being, you know, running a small business is not easy. Keeping the budget in check is far from easy. But with all those compromises, at some point things start to change. So, you know, hearing about the scratch kitchen, hearing about seasonality, knowing that you're going into it in a certain way with a certain mindset is, I don't know. It's comforting and hopeful.
Well, I agree because so like, yes, coming in small business ownership is not easy, but like both Dennis and I want to have pride in the business that we own, and what we're presenting to the world is very much what the two of us feel and believe and how we live our own lives. And, you know, when someone once told me, don't use yourself as market research, but like, I think in this way, I think we can, because I know that there are other people like us that appreciate good food and good beer. And really, we have a great cocktail program. We have a great wine list. Like, you know, it appeals to a lot of different people. I think it's okay to kind of lean on the things that you love when it comes to building your business. And I do think that Cincinnati will respond accordingly. We have this amazing restaurant scene here. Great food, really great culture, a lot of art, a lot of music. And people are willing to spend money for their experiences here. And I maybe that's because the cost of living in the Midwest is so agreeable, especially, you know, compared to like California or something like that. And so, yeah, it's been pretty refreshing. And I hope that, you know, people understand when we finally open.
We've talked a lot about food. I'm curious about the cocktail program and the wine program and et cetera, but this also being a beer show, what's in the tanks right now? What are you excited about?
I have 4 beers in right now. We're still brewing quite a bit. It took the state of Ohio quite a bit of time to approve our license. And in here, all of your licenses are together. And there was a little tax issue with the previous owner that held us up. So unfortunately, I only started brewing a couple weeks ago. But we've got a Kolsch because I wanted lager, but didn't have enough time to make it right to open.
Smart.
A West Coast IPA. We've got a hazy IPA. I've got a really nice, somewhat modern West Coast pale that will retain a little bit of haze to it. We're not going to find it or anything like that. A cranberry orange sour for the holidays.
Makes sense.
Just a really nice, easy drinking pub beer. And I do have a Hellas in the tank. And then once we start moving these beers out, it's a 10-barrel system with 20-barrel fermenters, and then I have 20-barrel serving tanks, which is really nice. So I started with 10-barrel batches of everything. But once those start moving into the serving tanks, I can then start filling up the tanks again with, a porter. And I don't know, like it's a beer drinking town. Like I think Cincinnati likes really uncomplicated beer styles because they like to drink in volume. And that's great because that's the kind of brewer that I am. I like really approachable, accessible beer styles and flavors because I don't think that beer should be complicated. I do agree that it's okay to obsess over the beer, especially as a brewer.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to drinking it, I don't want it to be a complicated experience. Like I want you to be able to pinpoint certain characters and flavors within the beer itself and not have to just really sit there and dissect it in a way that just takes your attention away from like the real world. And so I guess when it comes down to it, they're just beers to gather over and beers that are very food friendly.
I like that.
Yeah.
I also I've been seeing a lot more pub beers these days and just sort of some of the, like English milds and just everyday, drinking beer, drinking ales kind of thing. There's got to be some fun in making those, right?
I think so. Because a lot of my inspiration as a brewer comes from inspiration of things that I've consumed in other places. And certainly a lot of those styles are beers consumed in other countries. And when it comes to like a pub beer or like an ESB or a best bitter or something like that, it all comes from like the feeling of the experience of drinking like that perfect example in England. Right. So it
Yeah.
usually like it garners this really beautiful memory and it is a super experiential thing for me that maybe other people who haven't had that experience would quite get, but those who have will. And I don't know. I do love hoppy beer, right? I like hung my hat on the production of hoppy beer for so long in my career, but just really nuanced malt characters, right? In like an easy to drink 4.5% package.
Mm-hmm.
Those beers are still fun and super enjoyable.
One of the things that I was curious about, right? Because you've laid out what you want this brewery to be, and you're at this really fun point in getting ready to open, letting people see your vision. And I think that there are some folks who hold on to these things so tightly that it can be, the people will bend to us as opposed to we bending to the people. And I'm curious, like, where your thoughts are on what you want this brewery to be to people when it opens, and then letting it be what it wants to be after a couple of weeks, a couple of months, when you hit a year.
Yeah, I talk about that, like, what does the space want to be? What is it going to be when we actually live in it for a little while? And I think that when people come and visit us for the first time, they'll realize that there's nothing else like it in the city. Certainly in terms of the interior. Yeah, we're not the first people to put a brewery into an old church, but like,
We're think even this old church, yeah.
Right, exactly. But it's the complete opposite in terms of like the overall aesthetic of what Taft's had. It was pretty dark, very churchy, very traditional. And what we moved towards is a very, very California in style, actually. Not quite California minimalism, but like light, bright, airy, lots and lots of plant life, better light, and just different lighting and stuff. And so I think that they will come in and they're going to understand that it is different. We know that we were going against a a brewery that had existed for quite some time, and people are going to walk back in and they're like, oh, it's the old Taft Ale House. Don't want them to feel that way. I want them to understand this is very different. And like, so yes, that first sort of hit that they'll get is that we're different than Taft's. We're different than what Cincinnati already has. And then, I hope they respond in a way of like really kind of coming to Mellotone for an experience they can't get other places. Because I think the city loves new experiences. You just have to show it to them.
Like that. Mindful of your time, and because I know that you're opening up a brewery and taking time to be on a podcast is
it's okay.
Not.
I told you, John, not stressed. I'm not stressed right now. We're good. It's Monday. It's the start of the week. Like it's good.
Okay. The week hasn't had a chance to reveal itself yet. I like
not yet.
So you're going to try to hold on as long as you can on this podcast that would not deal with the real world.
Just this moment of peace for me. Okay, let me have it.
Well, let me ask you then a question that sort of brings you to a moment of peace, and it's the green door question. And I know you've been on the show with Eric before, and you've gotten this question, but I'm curious if it's changed. The premise being on the TV show The Good Place, in the final season, they introduce a concept of a green door where the characters can walk through it and be anywhere doing whatever they want to be doing. And so if we had a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it, leaving Mellotone behind and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
You haven't even given me a chance to open yet. Like, honestly, I'm going to lean all into this and I would walk back into Mellotone because I am so excited about this brewery. I am creating the place that I want to drink and hang out in. Minus the fact that it's not on a farm. But like, honestly, John, this is the urban brewery of my dreams.
Okay.
Like, it is. It absolutely is. And it's been so long since I've been able to walk into a brewery that I could call my own, that I don't want to go anywhere else right now. Like, I want to live in this space. I want to feel it the right way. I mean, if it wasn't that, I'd say Hill Farmstead, but like, okay. I feel like I've said that before, but it's getting cold in Vermont now. So, no, I would honestly, I would come here because, I am like really anxious to see what it becomes. Like, it's this very giddy, childlike wonder of like creating this concept that is very much like all of the mental real estate that I had to offer at this point in my life. And there's so many different marks and signatures of like who I am as a person and who I am as a brewer on this building, on this business now, that like I'm just excited to see what it grows into. And so I would be here and I would probably be sitting and drinking what is like the most perfect hell as I could ever brew. So it would taste as close to Augustiner as possible. And at this point, I would be here with my family and my significant other because they were not a huge part of my brewing life before because they were all living over here and I was in California, kind of on an island. And now they have the ability to kind of witness it with me. And so I'm happy to bring them all along.
I like that. And I don't know that I've ever ended a conversation excited about visiting Cincinnati.
Yeah,
but you've done it. You've the convention and tourist board should hire you to do outreach because I am actively excited about coming to Cincinnati. And it's not like I was against it beforehand.
Yeah, but you didn't know why. So did you know that? I know there's no decisions that have been made yet, but like Cincinnati is in the top 3 running to be the new home for Sundance, and which is crazy and amazing. I'm in like within blocks of 3 different major music venues here at the brewery. We have a vibrant art scene. The restaurants here are incredible. It's a pretty small population for how much amazing culture we have in it. And if you're going to the Craft Brewers Conference next year in Indianapolis, it's only an hour and a half away. So we're not far.
Okay. I will. Yeah, I'm done. I will.
Cool.
I will endeavor to get there to do this the right way.
Perfect.
going to let you go and do all of the pre-opening stuff. But before I do that, tell everybody where they can find you online so that they can follow. I don't want to butcher your website.
It is Mellotone Beer, Mellotone Beer, and that's on Instagram and on Facebook and mellotonebeer.com. We don't have a huge presence out in the world yet, but as we get closer to opening as we do, you'll start to kind of follow along what's going on within the space. But I'm just really excited to kind of show who I've matured into as a brewer and share that with the world.
I'm excited to see it. Thanks for being on the show this week.
Thank you for having me, John.
Questions, comments, guest suggestions, it's easy. You can email me at johnholl, that's JOHNHOLL, at allaboutbeer.com. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com, where you can check out the podcast page, our merch page, and read some great new content, as well as our archives, which go all the way back to 1979. Follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and why wouldn't you be, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Speaking of that, here is a word from this week's sponsor.
Where can you try over 350 one-of-a-kind beers from all across the country? The Festival of Wood and Barrel-Aged Beer in Chicago. Otherwise known as FOBAB, this legacy tasting event and competition is the largest of its kind in North America, promising the best and boldest flavors in craft beer over 2 days. With over 150 breweries pouring across 13 style categories, there's a drink here for every palate. Join us on November 22nd and 23rd in Chicago. Buy tickets today at fobab.com, FOBAB.com.
All right, don't forget, All About Beer has that podcast channel with Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast with Don Tess and M. Souter. You can search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer, coming up on 10 years almost, has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And don't forget to check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.